What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Scales 13. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you guys what not to do with a Pueblan milksnake. These are going to be some common mistakes made in Pueblan milksnake keeping. It's not an attack on anybody. Some of these mistakes I've made myself when I first got my Pueblan milksnake. And I'm going to show you guys how to keep one of these wonderful reptiles healthy and happy. All right, guys, so the first item on the list when it comes to taking care of a Pueblan milksnake, one mistake that we do not want to do is to use one of these colored bulbs all night long in the enclosure. Now hear me out. This is not a bad item when it comes to heating up a reptile's enclosure. What I'm talking about here, guys, is something that has to do with the animal's vision and the importance of protecting your animal's vision long term. If you use one of these for a few months or you use one for a short amount of time, don't get scared. Don't feel like a bad person. This more than likely did not cause any long-term damage to your animal's eyesight, but I'm going to explain why this item here isn't the best for your reptile for nighttime heat. Now, the thing is, there seems to be a preconceived notion that reptiles cannot see the color red and that the dark purple night bulbs produce a light that's similar to moonlight or something like that. And the thing is, guys, with the advancements that we've had in technology in the reptile hobby, we're finding out that a lot of this is not the truth, and that's basically just old information based off of the products that we used back in the day. But the more we learn, the better we're getting. And the thing is, even if the reptile cannot see the color red, for instance, right? Think about it. That doesn't mean that the light itself is going to be invisible inside the reptile's enclosure. So even though they might not see the color red, they're still seeing plain white light blasting throughout the enclosure. Now, during the daytime, this isn't much of a problem to see visible light because during the daytime, what do you have? You have full spectrum lighting, you got UVA, UVB, you got all those great wavelengths of light that the sun produces, right? Well, the thing is, at nighttime in nature, it's completely dark. And for animals that are crepuscular rather than nocturnal, they're only going to be out to see a small little bit of light in the early mornings and in the evening. So they're more of a dusk and dawn animal. So with that being said, their eyes aren't designed for that high noon or middle of the day light where it's bright and sunny outside. These animals' eyes are designed to see in situations of low light and darkness. If an animal's eyes are designed to basically see better in a low lit situation, then adding a bright light shining in the reptile's enclosure all night can actually cause a lot of stress to the animal, and it can actually harm your animal's vision. So if you're using this during the day to heat your reptile's enclosure, not a problem. I don't see anything wrong with that. If they can't see the color, they can't see the color. But you shouldn't have any visible light beaming into your reptile's enclosure at night when in nature it's supposed to be darker outside. So if you're going to put light on for your reptile during the daytime for a crepuscular animal, you might as well use your UVA, UVB, full spectrum lightings, and you might as well leave these guys alone if you just want to have something that heats up your reptile's enclosure at night. What I would use in place of that is a CHE or a heat pad. And that brings me to the second item on the list of what not to do for a Pueblan milksnake, which is to use any type of heating without a thermostat. So if you guys look right here, I have a handy dandy thermostat hooked up to Phoenix's heat pad. Okay, so if I move this here and I lift this up. Now, one thing that I'm going to point out is that Pueblan milksnakes are a burrowing reptile, right? So if you look right here underneath the glass, you can see your heat pad is right here, right? But if you look throughout the enclosure before I started messing stuff up, if you look at the corners, you see all these little holes here. That's where she's burrowing into the substrate. She's not an arboreal snake where she wants to climb and just lay on top of the substrate. So with that being said, she's going to lay down very, very close to the warm spot. And the same can be said for CHEs as well. Even though they're overhead heat and they're actually emitting heat down into the enclosure, CHEs do have a tendency to overheat as well. So what do? We hook them up to a handy dandy thermostat. This is going to keep your item that you're using to heat your reptiles nice and stable with the proper heat that you want without worrying about it becoming too hot and giving your animal burns. This is especially important for heat pads for a Pueblan milksnake, because if you have it in the bottom of the enclosure to heat the animal up efficiently once it's had its meal, or if it wants to just stay warm throughout the night or during the day, the issue is it's laying directly on that heat pad. So if that animal's laying directly on that heat pad, you only want it to be about 85, 95 degrees. Without a heat pad, that thing can easily shoot up to about 130 degrees, which could cause burns on your animal's stomach. Okay guys, so the third item on the list when it comes to taking care of our Pueblan milksnake is to make sure you check your Pueblan milksnake for when it's time to shed. Now with most snakes, when it's time for them to shed, matter of fact, I think it could be all snakes. You see how her eye is nice and black right now? Well, that eye will become a very milky, slightly bluish, opaque color when it's time for her to shed. Now, the thing about that is, ooh, she's a gorgeous girl, isn't she? I love her. Phoenix is so awesome. Anyway, guys, the thing is, when it's time for her to shed, and I'll put a picture up here in a minute, once they have that color, that means they're going to shed within the next day or so. Now, what I do is I moisten it when it's time for her to shed, so that way she doesn't have any issues with the skin getting stuck to her. And here's the reason why I'm emphasizing this for Pueblan milksnakes. These guys are not a high humidity species like some of the other snakes that people tend to keep in captivity. A snake that's being held in a high humidity environment should be able to shed very easily if it's being taken care of properly. Pueblan milksnakes, however, are a snake that does well in low to mid humidity. So that means the majority of the enclosure is going to be dry. If you look even over here on the cool side next to the water bowl, the humidity's only about 46% right now. Since the majority of the enclosure is in fact dry, you need those nice microclimates with humidity ready for when your reptile wants to shed. So that's why I keep this little egg hide here with some sphagnum moss in it, and I keep that right next to the water bowl in case she wants to slither over it or have a drink of water to help hydrate her body to get that skin off of her for when the time comes for her to shed. And the last thing on the item, guys, when it comes to taking care of a Pueblan milksnake, which really comes down to feeding most reptiles and most snakes in general, is to watch them when they're feeding. The reason why is because since this is a burrowing snake and this snake is kept normally on a loose substrate, you just want to make sure that she's not swallowing anything that get caught in the rodent's fur. And you want to make sure that the item that you give her isn't too big for her, because even though snakes can stretch their jaw in order to consume their prey, they're going to give the animal something that she can't swallow completely and give her any issues when it comes to being able to digest that meal and get it completely into the stomach. Now, of course, she has a very small head, and the thing is, you basically want to feed a prey item just about twice the size of the girth of the snake. You don't want to go too crazy with those sizes because of two things. Number one, your snake could potentially bite off more than she can chew. I know some people think that snakes are very, very good at choosing up their prey item and they just won't eat it if the prey is too large. But trust me, if your snake's hungry, let's just say if your snake is going on a little hunger strike recently, and there she goes, and she smells rodent, she's gonna try to get that rodent down one way or another. And if it's too big, he or she might wind up hurting herself. So you just want to be careful when it comes to feeding your Pueblan milksnake to make sure that the animal's getting the proper size meal. Another thing that could happen is if the meal is too big. Let's just say she tries to eat it, spits it out. She's not hurt, but the meal's sitting in there. Well, this is bad for the keeper and is bad for her. What could happen is the meal could sit in there overnight. It could start to decay, and then you'll have a foul smelling odor in your snake's enclosure, along with the risk of introducing pathogens and disease from the decaying prey item that's laying in your Pueblan milksnake's enclosure. Well, guys, it looks like Phoenix is pretty tired of me now and she wants to go back into her enclosure. I hope you guys like this video. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. If you have any questions or want to have a conversation, remember to hit me up on the Instagram. That's scales_13. Everybody have a great day. Peace.